Voices of Resilience, commemorating the United Nations International Day of Support for Victims of Torture in Nigeria. Nigeria is a nation rich in culture and potential, but beneath the surface, a dark secret persists.
So you know what that's true, man? I'm telling you the truth. Which one? The truth. You don't know to I don't know anything about it. You don't know to I didn't do it. Huh? Yes. So you know what I talk to, huh? Huh? You know what I talk to? If you really die here, I will deal with you. I did it! Yes! I did it!
On June 26th, the world comes together to observe the United Nations International Day of Support for Victims of Torture. Today, we stand in solidarity with those who have endured unimaginable pain and suffering in Nigeria and across the globe.
Nigeria has always had this case of use of torture by state actors, probably because of our history with the military regime, which of course has now been extended to the civilian rule. A clear point in case was the NSAS protest that culminated to the NSAS panels that were set up across the country, and you could see reports coming out from those panels that tends to lay credence to the fact that torture is being used by state actors as a tool of extracting confessional statements from suspects in custody. So torture is systemic in Nigeria, torture is endemic in Nigeria, and state actors, security agencies use torture for different reasons, and this is totally unacceptable, both by our national laws and of course international conventions.
When torture is accepted as a way, that society begins to devalue human nature. When societies descend into anarchy, it's not something that happened overnight. It comes from values that, relativize human worth. This person is of limited worth, he can be tortured. This person is of another status. Ultimately, you poison culture, and as you poison culture, society's progress is affected by it. People's aspirations are lowered by the fact that, their psyche is destroyed by vulnerability to torture.
I think the key thing that we must understand is that when you talk about torture, inhuman and degrading treatment, you reflect on the content of the Article 1 of the UN Convention against torture, cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment or punishment. And I think if I take it from there, it may be easier for people to understand, because first is to understand that torture as reflected in that Article 1 of the UN Convention can be physical or psychological. Torture can be extracted, or rather can actually happen through different acts, omission or compliance or non-compliance by state parties. And what do I mean here? So if you are a state agent, because first by the definition of the UN in terms of Article 1 of UNCTAD itself, which is the document I just made reference to, it has to be a state party, and I will talk a little bit more about it. So if somebody who is a state agent, a state officer, a security agent, whatever, acting in a capacity of as an official or public officer, okay? So the act that public officer commits that falls within either physical or psychological, with intent to either to collect evidence or to make the person that inflicting that pain to give something or do something. But it doesn't really stop with that public officer doing it. If that public officer asks another person to do it, it is still defined as torture. If that public officer turns the other way when it's been done, it is still act of torture. So for example, you are in a detention facility and non-state actors and other detainees begins to bait or trying to maim, and you hear the shouts and you do nothing. That is called acquiescence, meaning you are turning the other eye. You are also culpable. So you cannot say because your superior officer asked you to do it. It's not justified. There's nothing on no grounds can that be allowed. So that's what is stated here. Now, however, a lot of argument have been in terms of local and national domestic, and also domestic laws, that we should look beyond just what is it that state officers are doing or not doing, but to look at also what non-state actors are doing. So if somebody beats you up, why is it not captured under Article 1 of the UN Convention? So the argument here is, first on the first limb, is these acts that are committed by others who do not wield the instrumentality of power as public officers can adequately be dealt with within the remit of the criminal law of that country. And this is the sense that the UN is taking on to it. However, because of this issue of acquiescence, meaning you look the other way, a lot of argument is then being brought up that under that angle that you can pull and make the state liable for acts of torture committed by non-state actors where the state had refused to do something to safeguard the citizens, where the state have turned the other side. So in other words, you can see a stretch of that level can actually pull in certain activities by non-state actors. But by and large, the major focus of Article 1 of the UNCAD is that which looks squarely at non-state actors, as state actors, which is public officials, and that looks at whether the acts of, that they have committed or that they have asked somebody else to do, or look the other way when it's been done.
Torture is a grave violation of human rights, a crime that leaves deep scars, not only on the bodies, but also on the souls of its victims. In Nigeria, the struggle against torture has a long and painful history, marked by the resilience and courage of those who have faced its horrors.
How have you tried to deal with the effects on the victim? We now have compensation for victims of human rights violation. For instance, during the SARS panel here, in the Lagos panel and also in the one in Abuja, we awarded about 146 million in compensation to victims of human rights violation. So not only the suspects, but the victims are now getting some compensation.
In Nigeria, numerous organizations and dedicated individuals are working tirelessly to support victims of torture. These centers provide a lifeline, offering medical care, counseling, and a safe space for healing.
We have established a shelter. We have also established a counseling unit in the commission. And this is to make sure that they appear in the panel and the trauma and some of the effects on these victims can be addressed. The counseling unit counsels them and tries to deconstruct their mind to manage the trauma on them as a result of this torture.
So the idea of using torture can only be eliminated through training, and that's why some of those things that we also can do is to bring in these principles of human rights and all this in respect for the feeling of others, using democratic policing, working under approved standards and rules of international standards and rules, and also incorporating the issues of human rights in the way in which they carry out their security duties. And that is one of those things that is contained in the curriculum reform that we are trying to do with the security agencies. It is part of the security sector reform. The issue of torture is a global thing that everybody is working towards eliminating. But even when you go to the field, like many of the people that we have interacted with, especially the security agencies, many of them don't even believe that torture is inimical to the relationship that they have to build with the citizens that they are to protect. They still believe that it's a kind of a right to them, and just shows the deficiency in the knowledge which they have. And that's why, while you are talking about this, you need to use education as much as possible, right from the leadership up to the rank and file, such that everyone would know that it is possible for you to achieve positivities of the things you want to do without actually applying torture. We are not saying that they should decrease their military capabilities, but they also know that winning the hearts and minds of the people is also very, very critical to them being able to carry out their mandates and deliver on their mandates to the citizens that they're expected to serve.
On this day, we honor the strength and resilience of torture survivors. We raise our voices to demand justice and call for an end to this inhumane practice. Together, we can create a world where torture is a relic of the past.
In 1948, you had the first positioning by the UN and member states saying, let us come together and produce a document that will show how human beings are supposed to behave towards one another, how nations are supposed to behave to one another. And that's called the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And that was coming from the effect of the Second World War. And everybody said, how can this carnage happen? We must change. So it's the UDHR, which is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, covers a wide range of different issues and torture. I mean, people felt there are certain things that are so serious that we need to really take time to look at the whole process, what should be done to prevent it, to abolish it, to ensure that there is a system in place to address this. So the United Nations Convention Against Torture, Cruel, Inhuman, and Degrading Treatment, UNCTAD, was now bettered as part of that response, just like so many other things were bettered in different dimensions. Now, in that UN Convention Against Torture, there were things that were raised about, one, that to make it easy for us to stop this problem, you must criminalize torture. That's one of the things. You must make it a crime in your country. That's one. There are so many things. Then Article 19 of that convention says also to enable compliance, because it's one thing to have a law, it's another to have compliance. So to make it easier for people to comply, he now said every member state that signs, ratifies this document, because once you sign and ratify, means you say, I am ready as a nation to come under compliance with the provisions. And especially when you do that without any exception, you didn't flag any particular clause which is an exception to you. That Article 19 says member states that have signed it should send reports. And that report only says, this in relation to these provisions, these are how we have been complying. These are the things that we do, and these are, even if you have a challenge, you can also say, these are where we have a challenge. I mean, if you can give us help as a nation, we can move.
Let us unite in compassion and determination. Let us be the voices of the voiceless and the support for those who need it most. Today and every day, we stand with the victims of torture.